Hmm? Okay. Deputy CAO, do you have the swearing in
Yes,
statement?
I do. I have it all here, and Councillor-elect has one as well, but were you gonna do the land acknowledgement first?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we've, yep, okay. Well, we will begin by acknowledging that we are gathered again tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Just before we actually call the meeting to order, we would swear in our councillor-elect, our newest councillor, Suzanne Lonis-Croft. Congratulations again, Suzanne, on your election.
Thank you.
And Deputy CAO, if you have the,
Thank you. I'm just finishing our setup here.
okay,
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. On September 13th, 2022, Council declared a special election to be held on November 26th, 2022 for the office of Councillor to be elected at large following the resignation of Councillor Alice Burdick. An alternative paperless election was held, with electors having access to online and telephone voting from 8 a.m. November 12th until the close of poll at 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 26th. 2 individuals registered as candidates in the election for the council seat, Suzanne Lonis-Croft and Brian Palfreyman. At the close of the poll at 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 26, 2022, the votes were as follows. Suzanne Lonis-Croft received 286 votes. Brian Palfreyman received 130 votes. 1 vote was spoiled, for a total of 417 votes. With a total of 916 qualified voters in the town of Mahone Bay, the 2022 special election saw a 45.5% rate of voter participation. This evening, I invite Councillor-elect Suzanne Lonis-Croft to take the council member's oath of allegiance and of office, and with that, be officially sworn into Mahone Bay Town Council. Yep, just read.
I, Suzanne Lonis-Croft, swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, his heirs and successors according to law. And I am dutifully qualified as required by law for the office of Councillor of the town of Mahone Bay. And that I will truly, faithfully, and impartially execute the duties of the office to which I have been elected to the best of my knowledge and ability. And I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward, promise thereof, for the exercise of any partiality or undue execution of the duties of my office.
So I will sign that this has been sworn in front of me.
King Charles III.
Yeah. There's not for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well,
Excellent.
Councillor Lonis-Croft, congratulations yet again and welcome to our happy family. And if you're good, if you're really, really good, at some point in the future, you may get recognized for the years of service that you have undertaken in the name of the town. And Councillor Carver, who was not able to attend the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities meeting in November, was so recognized for 10 years of service to our council. Thank you, Councillor. And with that, we will call the meeting to order. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. I believe we have an amendment, but we'll first call for a motion to approve. It'll be as amended, but. Okay, seconded by Councillor Carver. Deputy Mayor, you have an amendment.
Yeah, I just like to withdraw the item 7.2.
Newcomers to Mahone Bay, which is Tina's topic. Councilor Wilson.
Can I slide something in its place, just call it area?
Okay. That's an easy one. Well, we do have areas, community solar garden monthly update. You see it as something.
Well, I could
separate?
tack it under that.
No,
Okay,
you're better to add it because it's not solar related.
yeah, it's a separate item altogether. Okay, so is the mover comfortable with the amendment? Well, even if
Yeah.
you added it, you have to be. Seconder, you're happy with it? Okay, the motion as amended. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting on the 24th of November. What is your wish, council? Councilor Feeney?
Mayor, the minutes looked in order, and I move that we approve the minutes of the November 24th, 2022 regular meeting.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Now. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the special meeting of December the 1st. Councilor Carver?
Move the minutes of December the 1st special meeting, be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. We have a seconder, Councilor Wilson. On the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Let's go right on to item 3, presentations. And we have Paul Snow and Tim O'Regan with us this evening, who for the next 10 minutes is going to tell us about the Brighter Days Capital Campaign.
Thank you, David. We're just waiting for it, I think, to come up.
Okay,
And
And they can all see it on your screen.
We've got it on the screen.
There we go.
And the YouTube community.
Yeah.
Should we swing them around a bit?
Make sure they get working.
is it on each screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Click on it.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, yeah. Amen.
Okay.
Sorry, just the volume.
Babies.
Help me here. I've never seen one of these things before. There you go. It's muted.
Excellent.
Action.
My son's only 16 months old. And he's got that down.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the Brighter Days campaign and the changes that we're going to see in our regional hospital in Bridgewater.
Sorry, Jen.
I'm sorry, that's our YouTube.
Yeah, it's probably YouTube.
Maybe we should just, because you might turn off YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we should just turn those off because you don't.
Does
need them
anybody
on our
really
screen.
strongly need these?
Okay,
We can put them on screen, you know.
There you go. I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Now you're on.
Video on a laptop. It's
okay.
it's in the agenda.
Let's roll on, folks.
My name is Paul Snow. I'm the chair of the pace setting committee of the campaign, which is responsible for raising donations over $100,000 from the community. And joining me tonight is Tim O'Regan, who is one of the co-chairs of the entire campaign. So with the time that we have, we're going to talk a little bit about the project itself, the scope of the project at the hospital, talk a little bit about the campaign, the Brighter Days campaign, the impact on the community, and also talk a little bit about ways that the community can give. So, I should go back to that. So just a brief overview of the project itself. The size of the hospital will increase by 1/3. So it's close to a 50,000 square foot expansion. The overall cost is anticipated, and this was an estimate several years ago, about $116 million. And there'll be a 2-story addition, a single-story addition, which will encompass a new MRI suite, and 2 smaller additions that will accommodate upgraded electrical and mechanical systems. If you look at the highlights, there are many things going on, but what we've outlined here are the key things. The first one is the emergency department, which will triple in size from the existing hospital. The number of examination rooms will increase from 14 to 20. And when the original hospital was built in 1988, the emergency department was anticipating at that time about 3,000 visits a year. And it looks like, based on the numbers that we've seen so far this year at the hospital, there'll be over 20,000 people visit the hospital this year. So we've really outgrown the footprint that we have in the area for the emergency department. So this is a critical part of the expansion that we're talking about with the hospital itself. There's also going to be the addition of a new dialysis unit, which will add 12 chairs. And as some of you may know, people that need that treatment today have to travel elsewhere to get it. And either they have to go to Queens in Liverpool, or they have to go to the Valley or into the city. So when you have to do this 3 times a week, it becomes a major burden for people to have to do that. But now with this expansion, we'll have that new unit and the ability to service, I think, up to 36 patients a day with the 12 treatment chairs. There's also, as I mentioned, a new MRI suite, which will be able to do 3,000 scans a year. And again, this is a service today that we have to travel elsewhere to get, primarily in the city. I think there's also one in Canfield that we can go to, but people do have to travel to those areas. There's also going to be a new SPECT CT scanner, which replaces an existing scanner that we have at the hospital today, but it's quite dated and has been on the replacement list now for the last 4 or 5 years. So this will be a significant upgrade in that area as well. There's also going to be expanded space for endoscopy and day surgery. And again, those areas today are very congested and tight if you had the opportunity to be in any of those. But with this extra space, it will open up things quite a bit. There will be weather protected ambulance space, and there's a new access road also to a helipad for access to the hospital. And the construction has already started at the hospital. If any of you have been in the area, there's a lot of activity there now. There's going to be a crane go up in the next couple of days on site. And the construction will be phased in over a 4-year period, and it looks like the hospital will be completed, or the addition will be completed in 2025. Just briefly talk about the campaign itself. The community, with this hospital expansion, the community was asked to get involved with raising funds for the essential equipment that was needed in the hospital. So the campaign decided that the target for the raise was $9.5 million. So that's our target in terms of raising the funds that we need for the equipment. We've been operating as a group now for over a year. So we've only information has only come out recently in the press and the radio, but we've been working behind the scenes on this now for the last year or so. David Himmelman and Tim are the co-chairs, and both of these gentlemen have shown their interest in this and have both donated $500,000 each to the campaign in the last year. So that was a great start in terms of the money that we ended up having to raise. There's in excess of 100 volunteers that are going to work on the campaign. So there's people from all over Lunenburg County and also parts of Shelburne County who are involved with the campaign. And the response that we've gotten from the community so far has been very supportive, and there's a lot of interest in the community, particularly with the new services that are being added to the hospital. So that's a brief overview. Tim is going to talk a little bit about the impact on the community and ways that the community can get involved.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so the Social Regional Hospital services an area from Hubbard's essentially all the way down to into Shelburne County. So it's quite a large catchment area, very, very long, and takes into consideration many communities. The redevelopment project is going to have a positive, we know will have a positive impact on the recruitment and retention of the medical staff that work there. And as a matter of fact, we also anticipate, because of the additional services that are going to be added here, we anticipate having to add another 60 to 80 new permanent positions, which is kind of interesting after hearing Tina's discussion to council, how that could have a positive impact on that project as well. One of the reasons why this is such an important project is because of the regional hospital status that Social Regional currently has, and it's something that we can't as a community take for granted. The regional hospital status gives our hospital a lot more servicing and the ability to provide services to the community that otherwise wouldn't be available unless it was a regional hospital. So the fact that this $116 million is being added, being invested right now, really solidifies the regional hospital status well into the future. So that's a win for us all, and that's really the number one reason why I became involved in this, because I knew that that this project was very important for that particular aspect. Construction's also going to have a very positive impact on the local economy. Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, Bridgewater areas, because of the number of construction people that will be involved in this project. We anticipate about 300 construction workers coming and going from the community daily. So as Paul had mentioned, we've been hard at work raising money for the last year. And as Paul mentioned, we've had a lot of success. We've had a number of very large donations. We've had a lot of positive support in the community. We've been asking individuals, we've been asking businesses, we've been asking institutions such as community councils for their pledge, their support in this. We've been making these presentations to all councils within the catchment area, and the different ways in which people can give. We are giving all potential pledge givers the opportunity to pay for up to 5 years or over a period of 5 years, or give one time. We've accepted gifts of stocks, bonds, annuities, real estate, and other capital project in lieu of cash. And today we're here to respectfully ask town of Mahone Bay to consider a gift of $50,000 over a period of 4 years, if that would make the pledge more palatable. We have had success already, positive responses from the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. They pledged 200,000 to the campaign. We've also had a positive response from Queens Council, Queens Regional Council. They pledged 100,000. And we've made the same ask, like I said, to Lunenburg. We're here tonight in town of Mahone Bay. We've had the same discussion with Chester, and we will also be probably within the next couple of months presenting to Shelburne.
Also Bridgewater.
Yes, of course, Bridgewater as well. Yes, thank you.
We've already presented to Bridgewater.
And each of our asks is it's in relation to the size of the town and the population, the tax base and so on. So that's how we've come up with the ask of 50,000 in proportion to the other communities. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have of us.
Yes, please.
I'm just curious about the relationship between this project and the provincial government, which I assume is building the actual building.
Yes.
So they just sort of say, we're building a building, folks, and this is what it needs, so go find the money.
I think with any major investment in healthcare, there's always an expectation that the community participate at some level. And so when the community took a look at this and saw that the investment of 116 was made, we decided as a group that we were in a position where we could raise $9.5 million, and that specifically the money would go towards equipment and technology aspects. So not bricks and mortar, but specifically technology and equipment as it pertains to the development.
Councillor Kirk.
Yes, well, I have a couple of questions. One was about the donation of land or property,
Yes,
and what would happen to that? Would you monetize it? Or
Yes.
would-
yeah, it would be immediately sold.
Yeah, okay. It wouldn't be used for housing for physician.
That is another initiative, but it's not our initiative. Yeah.
Just thought I'd get that in there.
Yeah.
And the second question was just the proportionality of the asks that
Yes.
you're making with the councils. I
Yes.
just noticed, I don't know what you asked of Noble.
Yes.
They're giving.
Yeah, we asked the town of Bridgewater and the municipality of District of Lunenburg for 200,000. We asked Queens Queens Region of Queens, I'm sorry, for 100,000. Town of Lunenburg for 100,000. We asked, we're asking Mahone Bay to consider 50,000, and I believe our ask of Chester is 50,000 as well.
It's 100.
Oh, was it 100?
It does say 100.
Yes, it does say
Yeah,
100,
it
and
does.
that was a error on our
100.
behalf. Yes. Yeah, we did always need to ask.
So the 50,000
Yes.
sounds more, thank you.
Now, I am in car sales. Sometimes it's better to ask for a large amount to settle for, but we didn't do
I
that
bought
one.
my car.
Jens, thanks very much. I'm just wondering if you can share with us a bit about your relationship with the South Shore Health Services Foundation, which obviously is a longstanding foundation in the community that would fund similar things a lot in Lunenburg
Yes.
historically, as you know, and sometimes in Bridgewater. Are you completely separate and distinct from that organization, and this funding is
No.
running in parallel to that group?
No, this money really is the Health Services Foundation, so sure.
Ah.
We're a committee that was born for a specific goal, but we're volunteers on behalf of the Health Services Foundation.
So Better Days capital campaign is under that foundation's
Yes.
umbrella.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's really helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Councillor Kirk.
is it appropriate to make a motion to refer this to budget discussions?
I would say that would be the appropriate course.
You're not allowed to make a
Make a motion,
motion.
but.
On the presentation, thank you.
Yeah, you can, new business, you can make a notice of motion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Excellent.
and then we'll go to the budget.
Well, the notice will go to the next meeting, and then that, if it passes, will go to the budget.
Budget goes. Okay.
Anything
else?
Just one question.
Yes.
Seems to be a lot of problems with getting workers, especially in the medical field. Are you anticipating having a problem filling the positions that you're gonna need to handle this space?
Well, it's possibly, but that's not really our area. We don't work in administration. It's possible. I know that the staff shortages are everywhere, not just in healthcare,
Exactly.
in every, you know, in the private sector and in the public sector. So it's possible, but this project's not going to come to completion for another 3 years. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and hope that these things sort of work themselves. And they always tend to. So, you know, these issues are usually cyclical. So I'm certainly hoping that by the time this project comes to completion, we'll be able to fill all those positions.
I think there's also an aspect of if you build it, they will come, because it'll be probably the most modern facility in the province, and you know, this is a desirable area for people to live. So, you know, we're probably going to have less issues than perhaps some other areas would. But again, it's 2 years away.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Are people going to park everywhere?
We're gonna have to set up another committee for that one.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, it's in this or some parking.
I haven't heard about it specifically.
Yeah.
I'm sure the administration is. Yeah. They're working. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
James, very sad.
Okay. Oh, it's being driven by that one.
Yeah.
That's why I think cool. Thank you.
It should be as simple as.
Oh, geez, who's that? Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that.
okay. Okay. Let's go back to our agenda. Number 4, we have one correspondence item for action. And that was a note from George Anderson. It's going back to find my agenda. Bear with me. And this is where George is talking about the new chamber piece. Not chamber pot, chamber piece.
Mayor, can I ask the CEO question on this item?
You certainly may.
CEO, so I guess my takeaway was that the chamber viewed Modal's departure from Blockhouse as an opportunity to kind of reposition the Mahone Bay Vic as more of a regional Vic, less focused just on the town and more focused kind of regionally. Is that kind of correspond with your?
Yeah, my understanding is they've proposed that to MODL, or they're prepared to propose that to MODL. And they wanted the town's blessing in so doing. I'm not sure to what extent they've had a conversation with MODL yet.
And notionally, if that conversation was successful, then MODL would be providing some in-kind contribution or even financial contribution to augment the existing program that they have there. And
that's my presumption as well, that would be the chamber's benefit to doing this, as well as just providing more visitor services.
That doesn't strike me as it looks to me like it's a win-win if the Vic can be expanded mandate versus we're a small town, and I think everybody who comes to Mahone Bay also goes to Lunenburg, and they also go to Chester, and they also we're a thoroughfare as well. So strikes me that that's a decent idea.
It could be a good thing for the town too, especially if MODL, I'm sure they'll have to give some financial contribution to the upkeep of the facility and everything, which would help the town does it. You could hope so anyway.
So we don't really have sorry, David.
No, I was just gonna say, that's one of the issues that we haven't seen a plan from our VIC or our MBTCC. He may have, as to what this is going to mean to them in terms of operational cost management. Are we going to end up providing everything for MODL and the town of Mahone Bay? And we're already involved with Chester, because they've all abandoned it.
So I haven't seen anything you guys haven't seen, but I guess I just wanted to kind of clarify, especially for any viewers, the town leases the building, and we do so generously. We're not making money on that, so we're providing the building, but we don't subsidize the operation of the VIC,
No.
the staff and everything. That's all handled by the chamber. So my assumption would be that any kind of partnership they can work out with MODL would be intended to just sustain the existing operation, because every year I know they struggle with the funding of it. So the benefit to the town as a corporation, not really going to change anything, I don't think. But as a community, the VIC would probably continue for years to come, whereas it might otherwise be in question. I think that's the main benefit.
Mhm.
Deputy Mayor.
So for me, the only information that's lacking from this is how will this impact us as a town? There's no clarity as to whether there be any positive, maybe it's assumed, or negative impact of having any partnership with Morgan. And so even giving clarification from our side, it's difficult to give clarification when there's no clarification on their end as to what this partnership entails.
And I think we should be cautious about how much information we need. You know, we're leasing them for the operation of VIC. They decide how the VIC is operated, and ultimately our lease doesn't comment that it should only be a VIC for advertisement of town businesses.
Right.
I would say the chamber themselves are the appropriate entity to deal with any like concerns from the local business community around their representation at the VIC. And they're the ones bringing this concept forward.
Which brings my next question. So what are we being asked?
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, we're being asked to give our blessing to their negotiation with MODL. And since we have no direct role in the operation of VIC, I would recommend that council could do that. I don't know if it's a motion.
Council Wilson.
Yeah, we do, we're asking for issues and concerns, and I think I would move that we write to George and say that given the current circumstances of them leasing the VIC from the town, and they're running the VIC, we have no issues or concerns as long as they continue to abide by the rules of the road, the terms of the lease.
Okay. Councilor Carver.
Do I have a seconder?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So
This is on the
question,
question, please.
So that sets precedents that they need to be coming back to ask that question. But I'm wondering why they need to ask that question of us. Since we said, because I remember this conversation, we had a very long conversation on that.
The lease.
The lease was being signed and the questions around, so what would they need to be doing on that side, and what would they need council approval? And I didn't think that how they operate inside they needed our approval in any way, shape, or form.
No, I don't think that it technically does under the lease.
So this doesn't need to come to council.
Well,
I mean, I think it's being, Kelly's got more to do with the fact that we've got the letter than it does.
I think George is just trying to be polite.
Polite, okay. But then in being polite myself, just to tell you, we don't need our approval to do that.
Yeah.
Rather than have a motion of council for setting a precedence around the lease that we don't need to sign.
I think it may be partially because MODL, Economic Development Department runs their tourist bureau in the VIC, and that's part of their position. Whereas this is a chamber running.
Yeah, and then I guess a change of focus of the Vic really being there. I think the CAO makes the point, it's not there exclusively to market, town and home bay businesses, but obviously we'll have a more broader mandate, but.
And I think we can be reasonably sure that 3 weeks or 2 weeks after this change takes place, there will be people complaining about the fact that the VIC is not focusing solely on business.
Yeah, fair enough, but.
Yeah.
So which then becomes our problem, because we have approved by a motion of council for that to happen, rather than it being a case. This has already been something that's been discussed by council, be on the list. The chamber is on that decides that. It's not council that's deciding whether we go around with this. So, but anyways, why have the motion? That's what I'm asking.
Can we not ask the MBTCC what their general plan looks like? Surely we don't have a contract that says they can at one point, we talked about with the removal of signs on the highway. And this is on the question, that we would put some appropriate signage around the parking lot of the Vic, which is.
No, that, we specifically said we did not want that to happen on the cemetery
By the
side.
cemetery part.
Yes,
But if all of a sudden we now have all of the businesses in Chester and Mahone Bay and MODL focusing their efforts in one place, are they all going to be able to put signs up? I don't think so. I don't know, that's a rhetorical question. I mean, I guess my concern is, it sounds like they've got a contract where they can literally do anything.
well, the lease is very limiting, which is why we spent so much time and staff spent so much time and we spent so much time going through it line by line and wordsmithing it to our satisfaction.
The only thing it's silent on is when it says visitor information services, it doesn't define the geographic area represented. That's within the chamber's discretion as far as the lease is concerned.
Fair enough, but the business on site. And the use of the property for non-Vic business is limited and vending on the site is well understood what has to happen to be able to vend and the requirement to come to the town and get a license for the weekend and all those things. So, I mean, maybe we'll stumble into a problem, but I tend to agree with this, with the deputy mayor that, you know, if there's no motion required, then we're probably better off not making one, as long as the terms of the existing lease are abided by. Go forth and multiply, as they
There's
say.
nothing for them to ask if that's what you're saying.
And I know that was part of the motion that Councillor Wilson made, and I'm sorry, Kelly, do you mind repeating your motion?
Sure. I was gonna ask you to read it.
Well, I know, that's why I'm asking you. Because I didn't write it down.
My motion was to write that council should, have staff write a letter to George Anderson, saying that we have no issues or concerns with their, proposal, as long as everything complies with the existing lease.
So I think that's what I mean, that's, we're only saying we have no objection. We're not saying we confer permission or anything.
And we don't really need a motion? You're suggesting?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the motion on the floor,
Okay.
which we're in discussion on, doesn't confer permission
It's just
or set up a situation where the town's permission
Just
is
cites it as
required.
being part of
It
the
just
term
simply says we
agreement.
have no objection. Thanks for telling us and go on about your business.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Moved and seconded, had the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Let's go on to information items under correspondence. What is your wish? Council? Councillor Wilson,
Receive and file.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney? On the question. Deputy Mayor?
So, the letter from, David, in many ways, it is not clear about what the incident was, and creates, in some ways, just an assumption of what happened to these young folks. But there's been mention of similar incidents in the past in the community, and I think as council, this should, I guess, hopefully should bring to our minds the need for some urgent action around anti-racism efforts. I know there's that regional effort that we don't get very good updates about, or regular updates about where it's going. So I wonder whether we collectively feel that this is something that we can just assume it's been written, we receive it in file, and life continues. for our community, and given some of the other conversations we just had now, this is something that we need to, from my perspective, be very proactive about and figure out how can we create a society where people understand treating people other than how we treat our own family is not something that we want to see in our own day. I think that the more we try not to address that, the worse things might become for our community. And I think we need to show some leadership in some way, shape, or form. I would not want to prescribe what that
Well, that's what I was
leadership
gonna
should be. And the reason why I don't want to prescribe is that I'm impacted similarly with similar kind of behavior on almost I won't say daily basis, but on a monthly basis, I will have experiences that are not positive. And so I have thick skin so I can survive it, but you have people who move to this community who had lots of trauma in the past, and that will not be very, very good for them. And so I think, like I said, I don't want to prescribe solutions. I just want to put it in your hearts that at some point something needs to be done, and you are the leaders in this community, and this community needs leadership from you folks in some way, shape, or form. And there are many resources out there we can reach out to and find ways to do something. If it's policy work, there's some policies we can think about. If it's just community mobilization to just create a welcoming community, there's a South Shore welcoming communities that we can, or multicultural association we can reach out to with more ideas. And so just trying to point out that that's something we need to actually act on and not hope somebody else will come into the association.
Your worship, if I may, I agree totally, by the way. But my problem always is, what does that mean when you roll out of bed in the morning? What do you do when your feet hit the floor? What concrete things? And I think I heard you talking a bit about policy and things like community action, and I'm wondering if one of the first things we could do is get behind Tina's approach in a more muscular way. I don't know this, and I don't even know where these people are coming from. But if we have 28 or 30 people parachuting into Mahone Bay on a particular date in the next 6 months, it's going to be quite a little shock to them and to many other people in town. So we need to get our act together.
And she was saying people already are commenting that these
See
folks
my
are taking
house.
our housing.
Yeah.
and-
Of course, yeah.
So I just have a suggestion. Paul Pickering, somebody who lives in the community, works with
Works with.
ISANS, the Immigration and Settlement Agency. And from an employer perspective, he has some things that might be very helpful for council. And that's somebody who you can pick his brains on what can council do. And in many ways, I think he'll be very happy if you engaged him in that conversation, because he probably would have very practical ideas as to what needs to happen. I don't talk a lot about what you just discussed before, because I think there's more detail that needs to be carefully created for the community. But I think just in terms of getting ahead of things, that would be a very good place to start. ISANS has a lot of experience around similar issues and might be helpful, even as we wait for, I know staff are probably involved with the anti-racism conversations and with some of the consultants down on the God, that would be too slow to actually get us going. And if they add on to what we're doing, great, but we can't, I don't think we can wait for that.
The anti-racism discussion, if I might, is continuing to unfold. And we had a discussion, the mayor's deputies, CAOs group, we had a discussion probably 18 months ago, and the consultants who were hired, the 3 people came in, we had a discussion, and they came back about 4 months ago, and they talked about getting together with councils when the terms of reference had been massaged to the point that they felt they were ready. And then a message came out asking councils, mayors to invite their councils to a session in early December. And first it was Chester, and then Bridgewater, and then Lunenburg and MODL all rejected the invitation until councils had an opportunity to see the terms of reference, to see what was being proposed. It was difficult to ask councils to come together for a whole day to talk about this work that the group had done without them having seen it before. So right now, the ball is back in the court of the consultants who are, I think, working on an opportunity to present that terms of reference to the members of all the councils.
This
And
is
they
the,
can
this
read
is the committee's terms of reference
The,
and their
the,
mandate.
the terms of reference where they see the anti-racism committee activity moving forward in Lunenburg County,
Mhm.
right? So, CAO?
Just to quickly add to that, I think the timeline for that process, even if it goes as smoothly as possible from here, is at least 6 months to the establishment of a committee.
Yeah,
So I think to the point, it's, two parallel, hopefully complementary things. And we know we'll have a presentation in the new year on the more quickly moving one, and then hopefully also in the new year, get some terms of reference for the other one. But judging by the accessibility committee, the startup will be 6 to 12 months, even once we get moving.
yeah. So it's not that, and there has not been anything to bring the council. I've never seen a terms of reference for the group. We hear, there's a lot of hearsay out there, but anyway, that's where it's at. So what about this particular issue on the David's letter?
Well, we have received the file on the table, so I guess
Yeah.
it's just a question, any more comments?
Who seconded your receiving file? Councillor Feeney. Anything further on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. It's an interesting dilemma in the sense that we can go through all of our policies and all of our bylaws and all of our issues and codes and whatnot. But how do you change the heart or mind of someone on the issue? How do you go? Well,
It's the way we choose to live our daily lives. We have a wonderful artist here in Mahone Bay who did a wonderful exhibit in Chester, and Lunenburg has seen it, Rebecca Fisk. Why isn't Mahone Bay hosting? We could do that as a council, as hosting an opening of her her gallery display somewhere here in Mahone Bay. That's a way of opening up, and her stories about her paintings are just amazing. And I think it would help people understand what it is like to grow up in Lunenburg County when you look different than everybody else, your teachers, your schoolmates. It's an amazing and empowering exhibit. And, we could even offer to bring it to the school or something like that, because it's our experiences that change us.
yeah. Well, is that something that we want to consider, or maybe you could ask the question if you know the individual involved?
I certainly do know her.
Okay. See what kind of production it would take, maybe, Suzanne.
Okay,
Yeah,
I would love to do that.
okay. All right, thank you. Staff reports. This is Santa Claus Hyde here is going to give us our Christmas present.
In a few years from now, I'll probably have the red colored beard for this.
You have this report, council. Does anyone have any questions for the CAO?
Very comprehensive. 12 pages, I love it. Short to this.
Nice, nice and neat to the point.
I have one question there. Oh, sorry.
That's good.
I have one question for the CAO. I'm wondering if we're getting any feedback around the speed bumps on Pleasant and Fobo Road. They're clearly slowing traffic down. I don't think there's any doubt that they're effective in slowing in traffic calming. That's certainly evident for many of us driving them down, but I must say I have received quite a few a lot of feedback on the not on the Pleasant Street corridor, but on the Bobo Road corridor about the volume of the bumps. I'm just wondering if there have been any inquiries made to town hall and any.
And we've had a few people contact the town. Mostly it's to say they support the idea, but they have some questions. One of the main questions is, why are these speed cushions different from the speed humps that we have installed elsewhere? Obviously, people are familiar with those, and these ones are different. And I think we got something in the December newsletter to help explain, but essentially the council has explanation, but for anybody watching, this is a pilot of speed cushions. From my experience driving over them, if anything, they're less of an impediment than the other ones. Hopefully not so much less that they're totally ineffective. I've driven over them at 40 and I've driven over them at 50. I haven't taken it to my car by driving over them above 50. I think most staff have kind of tried to make sure, how do they feel? But yeah, comments have mostly been questions about the design. There's been some question, Faubourg does need some pavement, putting these in when we haven't paved the street. I mean, really, that's an advantage, because if we do want to change the design, and once we've had a chance to experience them, we're going to be repaving Faubourg at some point in the near future. That'll be a chance to re-up or confirm that design. Generally not a lot of complaints. I'm sure people keep the complaints mostly to Tim Hortons and other places they are. So I haven't received a lot of straight up complaints, and I did also want to note that there have been requests for additional services on Faubourg. So people will say, well, you've done this, but where's the sidewalk? So that's a comment that I received from a couple of people.
You've been using social media.
No, people call us directly, at least me.
Sounds like a particular posting.
Well, they might have been reading.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So I have a question about the bumps. Will they be painted?
Yes, and that should be done this week, as long as the weather holds. Yeah,
Right.
we had a little change because they're slightly different than the other ones, so we had to change the
They're hard to
pencil.
see in the dark.
Hmm.
And I have heard complaints and fears about safety on Foxford, on Fobo. Particularly in the winter when there may be buildup of ice and snow around them, and make it difficult to stop, or skidding, or that's one thing I've heard. And personally, my subjective responses about the height of them is that they're different, and some of them are quite high and some of them aren't so high. So it's kind of
So the contractor does do it by hand, and it may come springtime, they may increase or decrease one or two. Part of doing it so late in the season, of course, is we won't necessarily make modification to them over the winter, but yeah, I think that reasonably they aren't all identical, as much their best efforts to make them that way.
Deputy Mayor?
If you're still talking about the traffic issue, I'll have a different.
Okay, I just wanted to mention to the CAO, I got a note from my fan club that we disappeared from YouTube.
Oh,
So when you turned off his.
no, I've checked since then. It would have to have been more recently.
Okay, maybe she hasn't got it dialed in. CAO, or I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor?
I'll take that title.
We're still on.
I have I guess a question in sort of seeking direction around item 29. We deferred the foreign movement request to the plan on the process. We did not get a chance to talk about it during that process, and I think it's Kelly had sent, Councilor Wilson had sent something around. We need to make a decision, and I agree we need to. And I was wondering what we need to do as council to bring that back to the table so that we can have that conversation and make a decision rather than keep postponing this.
So my understanding, I wasn't here for the last Plan Home Day session, but my understanding of the referral of this to the Plan Home Day process is not specific to the Gifford Moody property. It's the referral of the question of street frontage for subdivision of lots. And my expectation would be that that's part of the coming public engagement around Plan Home Day, because we have a lot of owners of large lots that may be interested in subdivision and probably have something to say about the rules around that. So I'm assuming that by referring to Plan Home Day, it means Ian would be picking that up in the upcoming consultation, but I'll have to check on that. So does council want to see that go forward? Other than that, the opportunity was to separately just revise the subdivision bylaw. But doing so in the middle of the rest of the process, it does kind of remove questions about private laneways versus private streets. And there's a number of things about flag lots and other provisions that have been tossed around. So they are all related, and probably council would benefit from hearing from folks like the Gifford and Moody's who have large lots they're looking to subdivide as a part of the upcoming consultation process. So I think that's how it's playing out right now.
Go ahead, Councilor Wilson.
Well, I had a brief chat with Heather last week when we were doing that thing. Because I was under the impression that as the Plan Mahone Bay document is written, there was provision in there for people such as these doctors down on the other side of town to subdivide the back of their property onto a private laneway, as long as the people who own the private laneway gave them an easement or a right of way. She says that's not so. Because regardless of what you do and what your laneway is, you have to have frontage on the highway the way the land use bylaw is written. So unless we change the whole thing, that's a possibility, I suppose. I understand that the only way to sort this out would be to declare that road up to the sewage treatment plant and the solar garden a public road.
Yes.
Recognizing that there is a small but finite possibility that we could get in legal jeopardy or someone, if we were remiss in, say, plowing the snow and someone came down the hill and slid into the road and get a truck or something, they could sue the town.
Yeah. But that's because we have put the provision that it has to be.
So by the current land use bylaw, the fix would only be make that street public, and in other similar situations, create a public street. So that, but then the alternative would be change the rules so that it doesn't require.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I've said this before, because I have a laneway, which is a right of way up to my property that is on town property. And it's a 10-foot wide lane.
And the laneway is on town property.
The first half of it.
Yeah.
The second half of it's on my property. When we bought the property, there was a right of way right through my property and back, I think all the way to the town water line, back through those lots. We've had that removed because nobody used it. But I have 3 lots that are already, they have their own PIDs. Can I sell them and have people build a house on it because they don't have frontage on the road? But they're surveyed lots.
I mean, if they're already subdivided, you should be fine, but the long answer is ask Heather.
I think, Mayor, I think as we noticed, there is new development at the far end of town on the Mayor's Cove side. And there are new driveways or private access points onto Main Street. And there's a brand new one that just showed up in the last month. To a brand new home that's built on the Ridgeway. And, as we've talked about the inevitable development of the Ridgeway, and which is just, it's going to happen over the next 50 years because it's beautiful view planes and people will build up there. They will all need access to Main Street somehow. And so I think that the inconsistency of the access and the risk tolerance that we would undertake to provide access to Main Street through the sewage treatment plant road, the to be determined name of that road, and all the other developments from there to the Mater's Cove property line. It's just intellectually inconsistent. Like eventually we have to say, you know, why are these folks needing to live to rules that the neighbors that are, you know, 500 meters down the road don't have to live to? Now, you know, we don't need to litigate the nuances of Heather's specifically following the rules, because I'm sure that it's well done and it's all well intentioned following all the rules. But it would probably behoove us all to just familiarize ourselves a little bit more with the thinking of why new access to Main Street is happening on one side of town, but may not necessarily be allowed to happen, you know, on the other side of town, just so we can be consistent and have, you know, consistent understanding of really what the real issues are. I do think, to the deputy mayor's point, that we should just make a decision one way or the other. If it happens in the month of January, that's fine, but or even the month of February, that'd be fine. But I think because the planning session might be a little more open-ended, we don't want to let these folks go forever. We should try to wrap it up, you know, before you know, the first quarter of next year is over. I would think, if we could.
It would seem. Go ahead,
So
Councillor.
I'm just interested in the question of whether it's preferable to deal with that question as a separate issue, as an issue separate from the Plan Mahone Bay, to kind of hide it off, or to let it work itself through the Plan Mahone Bay process.
Deputy Mayor?
So whatever needs to happen in the plan on the process, I think needs to continue happening. I think what the Gafaris, from my perspective, would need is assurance that what we're trying to work out with the plan on the process is to give them access. So that it's not a case of we're not giving you access, at least they know we have a commitment from council to give you access. What you're trying to do is to make sure that it's consistent with our planning going forward, that we will not give you access and then we will go down the road and so we will not give that person access. I think that's what I think they would be looking for, is that a commitment that council will finally go to a place where we think this is a good thing for us to do. We're just trying to find a way that will make it consistent for us going forward.
And just to be clear, if we rely on the Plan Mahone Bay process to resolve this first, we'll all be dead of old age.
Yeah, but that's not.
Right.
Most of us.
I think you're spot on the money, but for me, it's if what the Gafaris are looking to do does not meet the legal requirements of our current bylaw structure, then we don't do it. But if we can change the bylaw structure through Plan Mahone Bay, although even then, how many people are on Plan Mahone Bay, it may not make it past that group written in such a way. I can't imagine that it wouldn't. But to me, that's the way to go about it, not to try and make some spot changes to accommodate a particular citizen, and not to try and skirt the bylaws, but change them and get the right bylaw in there.
So in principle, maybe that can work, but this is somebody, I think they asked this question of council even before I was on council.
Yep.
And
Long time.
in having this conversation, I don't think there's somebody who has said that is an illogical thing to do to provide them access to that property. Or is there somebody who has that thing that we should not be doing that? That we should be closing off that property completely so that it's not accessible for development?
I'd like personally, and as a councillor, I'd like to try to find a way to allow them to develop their property and
Exactly.
have safe access to Main Street, as long as they're willing to take the risk as they enter Main Street. And it's on them and not on the town. If that can be accomplished, great. And if it can't be accomplished, then we need to try harder. I mean, in my opinion.
Why couldn't we sell the Gafaris that laneway in return for an easement to the town? For
I mean, it is complex because obviously the whole strip is underlaid with sewer and water and, you know, like the easement would be like, this is all town.
Surface rights only.
Yeah. I mean, it's
I like the creativity.
But we can,
but it's an idea.
we can give them an easement, a right of way on that
So, yeah, I mean, just to recap, I don't want to beat this issue to death, but the way the bylaw is currently written, the only way that they can subdivide, so it has nothing to do with access, it's just to allow them to subdivide, to build it all, is to have street frontage. And it has to be on a public street. So unless we change the bylaw, which could result from Plan Mahone Bay, that's the point of Plan Mahone Bay, is to consider changing these bylaws. If we were to change the bylaw, then we wouldn't have to make the street public, we could just give them an easement and say, you can use our street to access your property, which is allowed to be subdivided without having frontage on a public street. If nothing were to change right now, and we make our street, our laneway to the waste treatment facility, a public street, then they have street frontage. And they don't need anything from us. They do, but there's no, you know, to Councilor Feeney's point, there's nothing saying this is only for you. Like, this is a public street. So people get confused, they turn up there, they get the fence, they turn around and go back down. Couriers come up, you know, there'll be other people driving on it. And ultimately our liability for public streets is the same regardless. It's, you know, it's not any different just because it's a small street. So that's really where the question about making, and we have a precedent, we made Park Street, which was the laneway to Park Cemetery into the street, and we've since had a subdivision on that street benefiting from the street frontage on that. But Park Street's characteristics were also different. It's a big, flat, open street, lots of room, and, you know, so it just was a different question.
Okay, thank you for that discussion.
So we've not resolved it.
No, it's working its way along as a bylaw change, and if anyone wants to approach it otherwise, they'll just have to put a motion on a future agenda. and we can-
Okay,
Sorry, Dylan, could you just make that point again? I don't think the deputy mayor heard that, but.
So I was just saying, on one hand, the bylaw change is working its way through.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if anybody ever wants to make a motion about making a laneway into a public street, a town-owned laneway, I would just put that on a future agenda as its own question, and anyone can request that.
I won't be there at the next council meeting, but I can put a notice of motion. If one is be
Let
opposed.
me put the notice of motion. Because I will get,
Thank you.
he's a good noticer.
sometimes they even remember what the motion is.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept the staff report.
for information purposes, do we have a seconder? Counselor now seconds.
I'll point over to the deputy mayor. That's-
You want him to second?
Well, he had his hand up.
I'm
I'll support it, he had his hand up, so.
Okay, Deputy Mayor will second your motion. Counselor B, on the question, all in favor, motion's carried. We're ready to sit down there a little further. We can get both sides of the table and sweet. All right, 6.2, new public works garage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to introduce this briefly, council requested that back in the budget process, we authorized an expenditure for the Public Works Garage as a preliminary design. The intention being to figure out what it's going to take to build a new Public Works Garage. We went out to market, we hired Jost Plus Architects, a fair bit under the established $12,000 budget to have this work done. So essentially what they did was they talked to Public Works and they heard everything that they could possibly want to do in this facility. And then they said, well, what kind of facility do you need? Here's what it would look like. They provided a report. I have noted in the staff report, the intention here is to be able to give council information on which to base future plans, future budgets. There's plenty of opportunity for council to have questions, for us to look at some other, possible scope of work. But ultimately, when we have a sense that there's a new building, if that's the direction that we've been going, the next step would be to direct staff to issue requests for proposals for the preparation of design build tender documents for construction of a new garage. So essentially, this preliminary design is a brainstorming exercise, and for $8,000, I think a reasonable one. But from here, design build documents are not going to be, that's the design, go build it. And the real question for council is between what we've got and hiring somebody else to do the design build, or it could be Yost Plus Architects, but whoever comes out from the market. Do we have more that we want to conceptually sound out with a consultant such as this one around the scope of that work? Or do we leave that for the next consultant who would also have to work with council to come up with the scope that, So anyway, there's a recommendation there. I just preface it with saying, if we're not ready to direct staff to move forward with that, obviously there could be some steps in between now and then. We don't have a budget for construction at this point, so.
And there is another motion at the bottom of that piece, CAO.
Oh, it just included the previous report. Yeah,
Okay,
so that motion's not current. It's just the one on page 2.
all right. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, so like as we contemplated the new building, we've had, quite a bit of increase of cost, obviously from our original conversation. And I guess it's everything we do is relative to the reuse or change of use of the old fire hall building, which was the original thinking for the public works building. I think just based on the memo and the costs that are noted here, based on this scope, which I think is around 4,500 square feet.
No,
I mean, that
51.
5,100 square feet. This strikes me as kind of outside of our affordability envelope, by, quite a way outside of our affordability envelope. So I'm wondering, Dylan, what your recommendation would be around, without simply walking away from a $2.25 million bill that we know is not something we could afford. Is there a way for us to figure out what we can afford and have it be something that's more realistically funded within our funding envelope here over the next 2 years, knowing that the proceeds of the fire hall, if we went that way and divested, would obviously reduce the cost, would reduce the net borrowing requirement for the new building. But I mean, just to throw a dart at the wall, like I think our original kind of price points were something that council could get their head around, which just for the viewing public was somewhere around 2,500 square feet at 2,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet, those kinds of dimensions at a price point of around $1 million. Or $1.2 million, I think was the number we had in the original council memo. So clearly everybody understands inflation, the inflationary impact, but 2.2 plus the land, which has an economic value, I think isn't something that we can afford right now. And I don't think I could get my head around supporting that today.
CAO.
So in terms of how to get from here to there, I think it's really just a question of how much involvement council would want to have. Like on one hand, council could just direct staff to say, staff are directed to go back, work with the consultant with a certain cap in terms of the amount of money council would like to spend on the project. That's sort of the minimum level of involvement. Or I could go back to Harry Yost and I could say, would you come and have a session with council where they could tell you what their concerns are, and then he could go away and take that into consideration. So it really just depends, if all we care about is an amount of money, Public Works can work with a consultant to come up with what they think is the best use of that money. Ultimately, there's certain things, as described in the report, that Jonathan feels would be a benefit. And a lot of those things would be lost in reducing the cost. But the question there is, is it Public Works to figure out, okay, if you had to lose some of this benefit, like some of the vehicles are gonna have to sit outside. So would you lose a couple of the heated bays? Like what would you do? Jonathan wants to perform more maintenance work in the building, which I think is a good direction to go. Would losing that be necessary to bring it down to the maintenance bay? So, those questions can be left, just say council doesn't want to go over 1.5 million all in, and then say, figure it out, come back with another design. Or we can have a session with council with more input. It's really up to council. As I said, we haven't spent the $12,000 budget for this, so I'm sure that Yost would be willing to do more.
Councillor Feeney.
He's the guy with the hair.
Not by much.
Your worship, my mind, this was not a brainstorm for me. My brain melted when I saw this. For the benefit perhaps of Councillor Suzanne and for the viewing public, maybe I could just go through the timeline, because the origins of this was a presentation which is included here, for the public works people to take over the existing old fire hall in its entirety. And it had a map showing all of the vehicles that needed to be inside, and so on. And the argument was that the 4,000 odd square feet of bingo hall and washrooms could be used for storage for the electrical utility, yada, yada. And we balked at that because we thought the operating costs of that building on an ongoing basis was something we didn't want to look at very carefully, and we'd be better off selling that building. Because I thought, and I think most of us thought it would be sellable at $150 a square foot, which is roughly $1 million. And that we could build a garage for $100 a square foot, and we needed 2,500 square feet. So how much money is that? That was the going in logic. Staff went away to look at a garage for public works and came back with a 4,000 square foot building at a cost of 1.2 million, which is give or take $300 a square foot. Which I know costs have gone up, but $300 a square foot for a garage is quite a lot of money. And it was pointed out at the time, and we said, no, we'd like you to go back and rethink it. And we went back and rethought it and hired this fellow, whoever he is. And they came back and said, oh, you're right, we were wrong. 4,000 feet isn't enough. We need 5,100 square feet. And by the way, the extra 1,000 square feet is going to cost $1 million, which is $1,000 a square foot. Now, I'm not a total idiot. At least I don't think I am. And that just seems to me to be unreasonable. Just on the surface. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something here that I don't understand. But what in effect this has done to me, for me, is it's brought me full circle back to the point where I'm saying, well, the only viable alternative then is to give the public works the old fire hall and by motion put a cap on the amount of maintenance we're going to pay for in that building per year of $50,000, knowing that we're going to send some of that bill to Riverport Electric because they're going to be in there as well, and call it a day. Because I just think this, every time we go back, it's another $1 million. By the time we get, I mean,
So
it's
it
just,
goes back to my original motion, isn't it?
it does, that's, I mean, that's where I'm at.
And are you suggesting that this arrangement would be a long-term process, or are we talking 10 years or 15 years?
I think it's at least 10.
Okay.
And it could be longer. I mean, those buildings are really are bulletproof. I mean, I'm sure it needs a new roof. But the rest of it is just, I-beams and metal cladding.
The woodwork wasn't done all that long ago, I think, but so it surely needs some work probably. But
Definitely needs a new room.
We've had lots of people kicking around that building, so we have a
Money
good
to
sense.
repurpose the interiors.
So, thanks for the reminder of, I guess, the history of where we've come to. I think I wouldn't want us to go back to the original conversation because I don't think we want to absorb the cost of keeping up that building. I think we discussed that enough times that that's not a prudent move to go towards. I also think that staff want deluxe too much. And what we need to discuss is what is it that council really wants or can afford for public works, and figure out how and whether we can afford that, because this is and fair enough to staff will want to reach for the sky to get the best building they can get from my perspective, and this seems to be, for me, that's the approach. But I think we need to think about what can we afford as a council, and potentially I think it's doable to do a smaller building that actually just looks at the basics of a public works, public works crew. questions around from my perspective. Why do you need to build an enclosed complete garage for all the vehicles? That doesn't happen for a lot of public works vehicles elsewhere, right? You only need a bay where you can walk, a large enough bay where you can walk on the equipment when you need to. If it's office stuff, we have offices here. We don't need to have offices elsewhere. I think we still have enough offices that we could utilize here. So there are elements of this concept that we can whittle down to come down to a building that maybe we can start contemplating when we monetize the asset that we have and get a bit more money on our budget to be able to offset and have a building that will last for a very, very long time. The other piece to thinking about this is that it can be, you can think about building it in phases rather than saying we construct everything at once. So in your design, think about what might be ideal and then think about what would be essential now and phase that out to be constructed, at least in a modular way that, you know, at some point we'll be able to add X, Y, and Z going down the road, but pay for what you can afford now. So from my perspective, this just gives us an idea of what has come out to me now is having an actual picture of what Jonathan and staff want, but we don't necessarily have to give them everything that they asked for.
Well, okay, Councillor Finn.
I know we've gone around a few times on this, but you know, I'm still convinced that we have opportunities to put the old fire hall and the property that it sits on in the hands of other organizations and or private sector owners who will have a better quality use of that building and that facility. And we heard of one a month ago. We also know that somewhere between the valuation that we've received, which is, you know, still not in the public domain because obviously it's information that we need to retain confidentially, but somewhere between that number and some of these more aspirational numbers is a market number that someone would pay for the building. And I'm pretty comfortable with anything from the valuation that we've received on up. Anything above that number, I could live with. I really do think that, as Deputy Mayor said, you know, the optimum facility is the one with the best combination of capital costs and operating costs over a long period of time. And also there's a real benefit of putting the old building back into the market, which would create, you know, from some of the ideas that we heard about at council a month ago, but it will become a net taxpayer. That site would turn around and generate revenue. But I do think that this sticker price needs to be massaged. I look back at Councillor Bain at the time, and he just said in a council meeting, he said, this is like, he gave a number for the fire hall. And it just sort of solidified the conversation around, we had a plurality of council that would support a number. I think his number at the time was $4 million. That was for that station, not including the auditorium. And that really became the focal point of all the budgets and the desired. We thought we'll work around that number because we think that's a number that the community will support. And I would see in a similar way in the new year, we really need to get to that point as a council to say, if we were going to go and continue on with the plan to provide public works with a purpose build, great, but it needs to be at a number that everyone thinks is reasonable, to Councilor Wilson's point. And I don't think 2.2 and 5,000 square feet is the right number, but I'm sure that between the 7 of us, we can get to the right number. And we just need to figure out what the best process is for the CAO to get us there. And what's a reasonable timeline to kind of get, you know, to get to that decision-making process, and how long do we think that would take? But I think we'll end up in a good place. I have confidence we will.
And timeline wise, this is well positioned because, you know, the budget is approaching, but we have time to continue to refine. We've made an effort with respect to disposal of the other building, but we have yet to retain the Realtor and get it up on the market. So the two things continue to move in parallel. Like I said, we haven't spent the budget to revise this design. Revising this design is within the originally established $12,000 budget. So we just need direction. Is it do this and come back for something that totals 1.5 million? Is it council wants to sit down with the architect in order to have a little bit of a back and forth about, you know, why put the budget at whatever level, what, you know? I'm really at your disposal as far as that goes.
I think, like, if we were going to receive a staff report in the new year, that would encapsulate some of this information specifically. If make an assumption about the proceeds of the fire hall, make an assumption about what funds can we draw down upon within the capital reserve, and also some kind of an understanding of will our ongoing relationship with Riverport Utility, to Council Wilson's point, actually, will some of the costs of running the public works be attributed to the utility, and therefore will some of the costs of running the utility flow through to Riverport? Like those kinds of drivers of an understanding of those costs. I think that would be, you know, if we could receive a kind of report that kind of lays out at various price points what the impact on our budget would be. I think that would be something that would make a lot of sense for us to review in maybe early February timeline. That strikes me as, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I
reasonable
mean,
enough.
you know, the challenge, as you've already, I think, laid out pretty well with attaching that to what we can realize on the sale of the
Yeah,
other building.
fair enough.
Is, you know, there's a lot of speculation involved in that.
I would use the valuation.
Yeah, okay. So I think we can incorporate that into a report. So your thought is get a better picture of how this would be financed and then set a sort of price ceiling for the construction.
I mean, in my mind, and I don't want to be too cryptic, you know, the valuation would fund a third and the capital budget would fund, the capital reserve would fund a third, and debt would fund a third.
Councillor Kerr.
My hesitation with supporting that particular approach is because it seems to solidify the idea that the old fire hall will be disposed of at a market value, and then preclude the possibility that it couldn't be sold at a lower price to a nonprofit group, for example. So I wonder if the staff could include that option as well in the scenario.
Yeah, just a scenario in which we have money and a scenario in which we don't.
Well,
That's great.
a scenario in which we have an interesting, appealing offer for the building, for the use of the building, and a request to sell it less than market value to a not-for-profit.
Yeah, I mean, in previous reports have always kind of reserved that as a comment, and I would continue.
Well, I'd
to
like that. I hope that would be explicit.
Yeah.
And if that's allowed.
So if I follow Joe's comments, is that we're just putting a price ceiling of around a certain figure,
Yes,
which is based on the valuation report that we got. So the rest of the narrative can change, but we're giving the CEO a price ceiling that he can work with, so that he can provide the reports that we require. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we either wait until we're in a position to provide a bit more of a breakdown of how we come up with the money, and then decide what would that inform in terms of a price ceiling, or just arbitrarily pick something and do the two things in parallel, I guess.
No, he mentioned the valuation that he got. That's it.
That would be one third.
One third, right?
Yeah.
So if that's 1/3, then it gives you basically the price ceiling.
Yeah, well, and that, I mean, I think I'm kind of colloquially quoting a number that would represent that, you know. But it's just a question of, do we want a little more analysis on that? And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we do know where capital monies come from, like we have streams of money that are going to that. It's just a question of, is it going to reserve, or is it going to debt payment, or is it going to a direct off the top
Right.
contribution? And part of it is how long we wait, so it'd be not to overly complicate this, but to the previous point about use the existing building for some amount of time,
Mhm.
that's already been floated as kind of the third scenario, which is just we use the existing building for a little bit of time
5 years, 6
in order to get to a different market condition that could or could not be more favorable, but it's very difficult to project that.
Mhm.
So I still, feel that we're getting out of the price range for the taxpayers. I mean, it's gotta be a big hit for them, and I think, going back to Councilor Wilson's thing, that we could renovate the existing fire hall and use that for a lot less money, even say for 5, 6, 10 years, until we get to the point where we can actually afford this type of a building. Do we, and get back to the park use of it, the longer we stall on this, Public Works is still working in that dangerous building out back, which they can't do anything in, and they're putting themselves in safety issues by operating that building. So I think the sooner we can get them out of there, even if on a temporary basis, the better for them.
Good point.
If somebody gets hurt or
Yeah.
worse killed, then where do we want to find
And
ourselves?
we do have, and we talked about this earlier, we've got our citizens are dealing with the cost of the fire hall, the auditorium, the pending increase in the cost of electricity. And we do have other projects that would arguably be more pressing in the town that are gonna put another bill out there for the citizens. At some point, the citizens are gonna say, I can't do it. You can't keep taking money out of my pocket. And the provincial government's doing the same thing, and the federal government with the carbon tax. I think we need to try and do the best that we can do for the lowest price in the short term, to see how the markets kind of turn around and whether there are any less expensive options. So,
So in terms of direction, I mean, we're getting from here to there. So do we want to give direction to staff to revise the design and come back with something based on different price point? Do we want to give direction to staff to come with a report on the financing of a public works garage prior to doing that? Those were both suggestions that have been floated here. If it's not about revising that design and it's about something with the fireball, I don't have a suggestion tonight. We've previously given suggestions.
what shouldn't we have, if we were going to consider the old fire hall, shouldn't staff be directed to look at what the options might be in terms of what are the changes that would have to be made in order to adequately accommodate the public works staff and their vehicles and the things that you say that they want to do in it? What is that going to cost?
So that's where, I mean, as you pointed out, the previous report back in March recommended that, but we did not see the need for that, and still at this point
New
haven't
guy-
been directed to. No, absolutely, and if you want to go ahead with it, I think the price is probably still better.
What?
Deputy Mayor,
Pardon me, Deputy Mayor, I'm just saying that answer to that question, Mayor, which I'll agree is dated because it was from the old staff report. Like that number on the reno alone was $500,000, a good hunk of it,
So that's why I would
right?
chime in. My position on renovation has not changed
Yeah, me too.
based on what we have. So unless we want to regurgitate everything that we did last time and have that debate afresh, but I don't think I'll be changing my position just based on this particular things. Maybe I'm alone in that side of things, but I would rather not go towards a conversation that for me doesn't make sense. Just
It's been well
wanted,
covered.
I wanted to chime in on that.
well, go ahead, motion, now's the time.
So I think a motion to direct staff to report back to council with, I guess, a more economy price point, project.
Are we gonna set a number for them?
Can I just say that, excuse me, iteration number 2
Right.
was that price point. The $1.2 million, 4,000 square foot.
Was the old one?
Yeah, that was the first of the not old firewall versions. And that's the price point we're talking about. So there's nothing to do except say, go. If that's what you want to do.
So I guess, the option you're talking about was kind of a back of napkin estimate that we received from Roscoe. If we want to go to the consultant we've hired and say, give us an option at 1.2 million, and they'll work with Jonathan to revise this down.
Yeah.
We've already engaged these folks. We have unspent money for them to do another design. Why not go ahead and finish that? So council has a $1.2 million option for comparison. You already know it's a sacrifice of capacity from what's been presented, but nobody seems to have any concerns about that. So-
Like, I think fundamentally, let's just say we did that. Let's just say we received a more in-depth, a detailed report on what a $1.2 million public works building looks like. And the 1.2, that number jumps off the page and people in the community will say, wow, 1.2. But remember, like the fire hall has an economic value, of at least a third of that number. And our renovation number is on record and in the public domain is a third of that number. We're already, even if we just walk up the street right now and use the fire hall for public works, like we're essentially establishing $1 million plus value on the existing building. And that's the number to compare to the 1.2.
But we're not gonna, we're never gonna sell that building for $1 million.
No, I didn't suggest we would, but it has a value that we would sell it for potentially. Plus, we have to put $500,000 of renovations into it according to the report.
That was my question. And I know that when you ask a question like how much renovation is required for a building to get it to where you want, people throw everything in but the kitchen sink. And they round off to the nearest $100,000, always in an upward direction.
Right.
My question, and really it's a question perhaps for Richard more than anybody, is if we said we're prepared to move public works and the electrical utility into that building tomorrow, but with an annual price cap for renovations and maintenance of whatever, $70,000 annually, is that a doable thing?
70
We
grand.
just have to go back and do the same preliminary assessment of renovations that would be required. And then say, how long would this get us? It would get us 10 years, break it over 10 years, it's 700,000. I mean, that,
We're going to spend $1 million.
It's
We have
the
a
work
70.
we recommended in March that we didn't get authorization.
But I don't think all those renovations would have to be made tomorrow when we move them in.
I mean, the point is, it's just crazy not to get a third party's assessment of that if we're gonna make a decision.
Yeah,
Deputy Mayor, please.
and for me logically, why would we do that? To be incurring a cost. 70,000, I'll lower it and say $50,000. We absorb a new $50,000 cost
Forever.
forever. Once that building can bring more than $50,000 or probably around $50,000 annually in revenue. From a decision-making perspective, why would that make sense? I would rather go for something that would have lesser cost and still have that revenue coming in, which will offset that cost. So I think for me that the decision feels very, very clear. I don't know why it doesn't feel very clear for all of us that this is we can turn it into a revenue making an income generating asset for us and lower our costs that we could have had in it with a new building, and that would be an asset that can be with us for much, much longer than this.
And the final point, and which I agree with everything Deputy Mayor said, that building's heated with oil. And that's off strategy for our town. And that's a very, and the new building will be heated with electric, which is on strategy for the town. And so the conversion is many, many tens of thousands of dollars. $50,000. I know we have a budget for get the town hall off of oil, and it's $25,000. So it's a real, for a 7,500 square foot building to move off, to decarbonize is real money. As we can talk to anybody at the Mahone Bay Center, have just done the similar thing, how much that costs. So I think there are other non-financial drivers as well behind that decision.
You have to consider everything in that old fire hall, except for the truck bays, is heated by electrical heat pumps. Truck base is the only place that's not heated with heat.
Just with the oil there.
And the truck bays don't need to be heated anyway.
There was always shut down.
Yeah, and you can put heat pumps in, which were promoted around. Anyway,
If we took the next step and used the budget that's already approved, do you think that we can end up with a package that can help with the conversation in the new year?
I mean, it seems like council needs a new building scope that is less than this amount. And if we could just have the direction, if it's 1.5, if it's 1.2, whatever it is. If we're ready to just name a number and get Yost to do a new design, they can do that, and we'll use the rest of the budget that was already established. Or if we're not ready, direct staff to produce a report to get ready, which I think would be the financial side of that stuff. If in fact that is actually going to bring enough new consideration that we change. I mean, it sounds like probably it won't, but.
If you think about, inevitably we'd have an RFP to build the project.
Yeah, so this report speculates that the preliminary design is just to give us a budget number.
Mhm.
And then we would go and we would do an RFP for a company that would actually oversee the tendering process. They would just be overseeing the tendering, development of the tender documents and that process for a design build. So at the end of the day, the selected construction contractor this is what we did with the fire station, would be designing the final design work and building. So their proposal would be, here's my $1 billion proposal. This is how I would design it. This is how I would construct it. They're going to be responsible. So yeah, we get preliminary design to set the budget expectation, hire a company to develop the tender, oversee the tender, and then a different company is actually selected to do a design build based on how we did the fire station.
Mhm.
So, between now and the preparation of tender documents, it's about setting a budget. It's about council's expectation. And the fact that we bandied around numbers from $100 per square foot to 390 from, so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of uncertainty facing council in terms of how much this building needs to cost.
Yeah, and by doing this, it wouldn't preclude us from continuing our commitment to the community group that came back last month and asked us to defer any final decisions on.
Yeah, they're totally
Fire
parallel processes as
Right.
far as I'm concerned.
And as well, we need our commitments to the folks who are using the fire hall in the next couple months anyway. So that strikes me as good timelines.
Yeah, we have time, and we will get a revised design back to council by February, for sure.
I don't think we made a commitment to Mr. Waterfield's group so much as he asked if we would delay our decision process until he had time to develop his proposal and to
Right,
cost it out.
Correct. But he was aware of the cadence of the timelines as well, so,
And the timeline in that case is we're not hiring a commercial realtor
yeah.
until we've decided that we've heard this
Yeah.
proposal, I guess.
So if we, it doesn't strike me that we benefit from having a defined number in the public domain, knowing that we'll inevitably have an RFP, but unless you think, Dylan, that it would be helpful for you to have one.
Yeah, I think,
I can give you a high water,
this
a high water mark.
process is far enough from the actual construction that I'm not concerned that if council says arbitrarily, we want to see a design for so much money,
Mhm.
that is going to set the bidding that we're going to receive in terms of the design. But I think
Mhm.
this is a budget brainstorming
Mhm.
exercise.
So why not, the way you framed it, it doesn't have to have a number, the way Councillor King had framed it around the valuation we had, that being a third
Yeah.
of the valuation, would that work? Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's like the motion should be a little convoluted to say, direct staff to
How
bring
many-
a revised design for new public works garage capped at an estimated price of
So.
3 times the confidential
So-
valuation.
so I-
of the fire station.
So I'm just gonna throw this
You
on
can do
the
that.
table, and it may not be supported by council, and I certainly empathize with Councillor Jonas Croft, because there are numbers here that she may not be privy to yet, but I'm sure in the fullness of time, you'll be nodding in support. I think I'd move that we should proceed with that next step. We really should cap the spending at no more than $1.5 million. So I'm just gonna throw that on the table and gauge what the rest of the group thinks about that number.
So is that a motion?
I'll second it.
Yes.
Is that net of any sale of existing?
No,
or-
not net. That's the gross number.
Okay,
And
And you,
my question on that would have been HST inclusive, exclusive, what's your? thought of that? It's only 4.78%, it's not
yes,
Includes.
inclusive,
inclusive.
yeah, okay. And obviously that number will be reduced by project management and the net and the proceeds of the old fire
sale
hall.
of the old.
And we're a long way from pulling the trigger on this, but at least we can get the information.
Hmm.
What do you think about that number, though? That strikes me as much more affordable. But it is on the, I mean, there'll be pressure with that kind of debt. We'd be taking on another $500,000 of debt, wouldn't you, I guess?
I mean, one way to look at it in perspective is the value people place on the services provided by Public Works. You know, we've spent $4.5 million on a fire station. We're talking about spending a third of that much. People value Public Works on a day-to-day basis. Would spending a third of as much as to be spent on the fire station, that's just the perspective.
And the old building will generate a lot of revenue and potentially a lot of beyond property tax, also potentially alternative use could be a lot of water bills and a lot of electrical bills, and a lot of public housing.
So the motion, have you made it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was to direct staff to revise the pre-design to 1.5 million inclusive of net HST.
And you seconded it, Deputy Mayor. I have to ask the question. When we discussed this before, we had 2 councillors who declared a conflict of interest, but I don't think it would apply on this motion.
Because there is nothing in this motion in reference to the former fire hall.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right,
so I was-
to what Mr. Water.
I wasn't here for that meeting, but
Okay,
if that was the
alright.
conflict was in relation to
Okay.
fire hall, that's not in this motion.
You mean about potential divestiture to the community group?
Yes,
Yeah, well,
if the decision was to sell or not to sell, it's a
Yeah.
different story, that's not what this is about. We're setting a ceiling price for the acquisition
cost, yeah.
of the building.
Yeah.
Okay, on the question, Councillor Wilson.
I'm just wondering, and I don't know how to do this exactly, but I'm wondering if there's a way to build into this motion or the project that's gonna come from it. A cost comparator that says, okay, if we build a garage or a public works building for 1.5 million and run it and maintain it, et cetera, for 10 years, how does that compare to doing exactly the same thing with the existing firewall for 10 years? Total all in present value cost.
I think that would be a separate motion to direct staff or a contractor
Good business case.
to
Yeah,
give us
the
those numbers.
challenge is like, we can bring back this revised report and include more commentary on operating costs, and I think that's quite reasonable.
Yeah.
But any of the comparative information about the fire hall, we have chosen not to have enough information to complete that report. So unless council wants us to go out and assess what would be necessary in terms of renovations of the old fire hall, I don't have an apples to apples comparison to make.
Not now.
I guess that's where that falls down. So we can emphasize the operating cost case with the new public works building, and I'll make a note about that. and that would come out of this motion. But there's nothing in this motion, and honestly, I don't think it's within our capacity unless we're gonna allocate a little bit of money to it to produce that comparable report on the old fire station.
Do it as a separate motion anyway.
Fine.
Anybody else on the question? On the motion, all in favor? Reluctantly, Councillor now says yes.
Annoyedly.
Pardon me?
Annoyedly. I don't think that's even a word.
Okay,
Look at that, we just saved 700 grand.
then we
If
go.
it were
from
only
there.
so simple, yeah.
Okay, let's go to item 6.3, the staff report on the home program review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this has been in the works for quite a while at this point. We had a report back when Martha was still here in the summer concerning intentions to do a review through the FCM funded Green Municipal Fund. So we now have Lauren taking over these files and has been essentially presented with an opportunity to move this forward. This would be a joint initiative with the other area units. Ultimately, the cost directly to Mahone Bay is very small. The other units have passed motions in support of this approach at this point. I can tell everyone that has been agreed to. The actual budget line there, $3,867, we're basically saying $4,000, would be about a third of the budget line established in the annual budget for road load initiatives, of which this is one. So it's unallocated money in our budget. I think it's a great opportunity. Anything with the FCM is a slow process, so we probably won't actually get to doing this work until next fiscal year, but ultimately it's not a huge cost to the town. So I would wholeheartedly recommend the council direct staff to submit an application to the FCM Green Municipal Fund to conduct feasibility program review of the home program. And like I said, this would be with the support of Berwick and Ganesh making similar contributions.
I'm happy to make that motion, your worship.
Thank you, Councillor Carver, and you're going to second it, Deputy Mayor? Okay, and on the question, you have,
I know it's penny pinching, but I was curious as to why a very small town we did not do percentages with a larger town.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we just had a conversation about, this could benefit us in not exactly equal ways and not exactly proportionate. Like, yes, there had been more users on the program in Antigonish, but not 6 times as many users on the program in Antigonish. And we just all said, as you said, not to be penny pinching, let's do this 3 ways. And, that's, yeah.
Sort of like the Chargers.
And then when it's a multi-million-dollar item, then we'll get Antigonish to cover 63%.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Now.
I must confess, when I read this, I totally misunderstood it. Because it was, I think, last council meeting, or maybe one before that, I made a motion to ask staff to look into leveraging the home program so that we could get a program together to alleviate some of the fiscal pain that people are feeling because fuel oil is $2 a liter and electricity rates are yada yada. And it turns out this is not that.
This is not that.
Clearly. So my question is, given the urgency of the situation, is there anything moving forward on that initiative? And what I was going to say before I get an answer is, my hope was that people would simply look at it and say, okay, if we can find a way for the town or area or whoever to finance these heat pumps at 0% for this year and next or whatever, to give people a bit of a break and allow them to buy a heat pump. Is that a difficult thing to do, or is it impossible to do, or how does that work?
Finding people to do it.
So quick answer, I guess Lauren is working on that report. I actually thought initially that report would come on the same agenda as this report. It will come in January. There are some options to do what you're talking about, and she'll lay them out at that time. And there's also another report from that same meeting on the, on Ashley's side of, can the town do anything to help people with bills and deferrals? And so those will both come in January.
Thank you.
Councillor Now and Councillor Carver.
I don't know how many people might have heard it today, but the provincial government announced today free heat pumps for low income families.
Low income.
And I just thought then, excuse me, the $140 million in subsidies of some sort for heating assistance.
Council Carter.
That was my question too, whether residents of the town of Mahone Bay are eligible for the heat pump program that the province is announced.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. Did the announcement you guys
It's
read
not-
reference efficiency one, or was it coming from the provincial department? of Energy?
Provincial government.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, if it's coming directly from the provincial government, our residents should be able to access.
If they qualify,
Yeah.
was the,
It's income.
So-
Yeah,
55,000 is usually like below 55,000 is what they classes.
And
low
is it a
income.
sliding scale under the 55 or?
Not sure, but you know, a lot of people can't afford that, right?
Well, Councillor Wilson has an answer.
I'm just, yeah, it says they're expected to have about 13,500 low income and 30,000 middle income households. So it obviously is on a sliding scale and will probably
Yeah.
slide up to include some of the folks in town.
and hopefully anything we would do would piggyback on that and be a further benefit. So I'll just, it's actually kind of good timing. Lauren has time now incorporate that into her report.
But finding technicians to do the work, they say is the biggest problem.
Well, and that was why the town's program was constructed the way that it was, because we had arranged for preferential contractors to do the work if people were going through us. We do still have the ability, we'll comment more in the new year, to do that, but we also have the ability to remove that as a requirement in order to be more of a catalyst and say, we would let you go find your own contractor, which previously we wouldn't do. So anyway, Lauren's report should comment on those things.
Thank you.
In between Councillor Now and Councillor Carver, I had your name on my list.
It was just. the
Was that your
Yeah.
response to him, was it? Okay, good enough.
Mayor, I'm just wondering if we have a list now of anybody in town who avails of the low income property tax credit or reduction. You know, obviously, you know, it strikes me that list would also be eligible for this funding. So maybe there's an opportunity to reach out proactively and ensure that those folks that avail of this program can also avail of the other program. Anyway,
All right,
Are we ready to vote?
sure.
I think we are. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the joint, if you look at the report from Lauren Clark, there's a recommendation right at the end.
This is on the joint building.
No, this is on the heat pump to submit the application to the
I
Green
thought that
Municipal.
motion
that
was
was
made.
the
We
motion.
supported it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, apologize. I must have nodded off somewhere. Let's go with the joint building committee recommendations.
Thank you.
Gets bigger and better all the
I
time.
guess this is down here as the staff report, but I also don't want to step on the fact that Councillor Carver has been our representative attending these meetings.
Only attended one.
He's only been one.
I felt like a deer in the
I
headlights.
don't know how any of the elected people can keep track of it, to be honest, but I mean, you know, I guess just to be frank on this initiative, we're along for the ride. You know, I think it does have potential to benefit our residents, but at the end of the day, consolidation of building inspection services in the county is happening, and we do need to continue to access them. So I would certainly agree with the recommendation here, and I understand from Jeff that MODL this morning did approve this on their end.
And being there, and even though I felt like a deer in the headlights, the presentation was very thorough from the person that had consulted on the project. And the planners in the room, as always, are so detail oriented and so invested in making the system work that they were all very supportive of these recommendations. And I think I mentioned last time that they approved, they recommended the approval of all these points and the inclusion of the town of Bridgewater and region of Queens municipality, which haven't been participating state. But with the proviso, it doesn't say so here, that these conditions not change. That if-
Yeah, they would have to sign on in
Yeah.
agreement to the other 11 points.
Yeah, so because they haven't been party to the process.
And technically, until MODL has received, until I should say, the joint building committee has received approval from the council, we haven't extended that offer to Bridgewater at this time. And so just meeting with Tammy today, but she noted that she won't consider this until these other units that are already participating have said, yes, we would include Bridgewater.
So we're one of those.
Yeah, so our okay on that is actually required in order for Bridgewater to be given the invitation to join.
Will I make a motion on this, that we're doing that? That we're-
It would make sense. So the motion can be listing all of the 12 points, or it can say, the motion is that the council accept the 12-part recommendation of the joint building committee.
I so move.
All
that
right.
council, accept the 11-point,
Right.
12-point recommendation. From the joint building committee.
Okay, seconding, Deputy Mayor? On the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Do it quick enough, doesn't hurt. The solar garden monthly update.
So this is just a report for information. I think this is the third month that Lenta has provided a regular update. So if there are any questions, but also this is obviously aimed at the general public. So if you're watching and you want to know the latest on the solar garden, there is a report in the package, which is available from the town's website. But if anyone has any questions, I can either answer them or possibly just take them back for Lenta and get the answer that way. And I think we will be seeing some more of this in person shortly.
Yes, next,
Hopefully the weather permits.
it's the same day as the,
Friday.
Is this right?
yeah, special council meeting is 9 to lunchtime, and then we go to
Yeah, I don't know how long a special council meeting would actually need, but this is at noon. The tour will be at noon.
the, it's 9 to 11, but we're talking really slow. Okay.
Rain or shine.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. Motion to accept the monthly report on the solar garden project. Seconded, Councilor Wilson, on the question for information purposes. All in favor? Thank you. Let's go to committee appointments. Now, this is for the citizen memberships on the various committees. You have a note that was emailed to you. There's been a couple of changes on the Climate and Environment Committee. We've had James Tilley and Richard Wilson. Some of you might remember Richard. He's been added to the Climate and Environment Committee. And the only other one was Catherine McCarron, who has been added to the Planning and Advisory Committee. Now, rather than go through all of these individual appointments, I would entertain, or the chair would entertain a motion to approve the appointments to the council committees of the citizens as listed in this document.
I so move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lonis Croft seconds.
And just on the question, I would like to point out to everybody involved, including the newest councillor, that this was a new process to select the citizen members of the council's committees. So we had formed a small nominating committee to review the applications. And that was it was a new process, and it's partly why the information is coming at the last minute and wasn't in the council package. But next year, we're going to be much more organized, or the next round of council committee appointments. And there, after we voted on this, there's going to be another vote.
Yes, on the bottom. Now, I would note that the nominating committee that produced this piece of work was Councillor Carter, Councillor Wilson, and our deputy CAO, Maureen Hughes. I think she actually produced the documents that were used in the process.
Yeah.
So is this something that was sent on email?
Yes.
Yes.
Did
Yes,
you run it?
Yes, it was.
5:30.
Okay.
and that's,
But I
that's,
haven't seen it.
well, there's been a couple of versions of it.
Yeah.
Couple of additions
Yeah.
since then.
So,
Okay.
and that, with that also, just to encourage citizens to continue to monitor the citizen or the committee descriptions, because several of the committees still need citizen members.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a motion.
There is one motion at the bottom of the page on the backside.
We're going to, we have to vote, we have to include a vote on the members.
All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you to all of the citizens who stepped up and put their names forward to work with council on these committees. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And further to that, I have a motion that council direct staff to inquire of the South Shore Regional Library Board about the rationale for an appointment to that board. And if there is a preference for a community member or a member of council. And on receiving that answer, that council consider whether an appointment to that board is necessary.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds the motion. Thank you, Councillor Carver. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'm not sure about here 100%, but typically they don't allow a council member. But
On the library.
Yeah.
Don't allow, I was on it several times.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the one here may be a little different. Can I ask,
Please.
Mr. Mayor, if there is an intention to nominate or approve council member participation on the committees?
I'm glad you asked that. The process is underway. A notice been sent to all members of council with the current committee postings. And then the councillor can identify another opportunity they may wish to have, whether or not they would want to stay with where they have been for the last 2 years. And we've asked for that information by next Friday. And we've committed to go back to them by the 31st of January with the recommended placements of councillors. And then councillors will then have, 10, 11 days.
31st of December.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they'll have until the date of the meeting in January to come back and say, no, I'd rather do this than do that.
So the
And shop
appointments
it
would
around.
be officially made at the first.
At the first meeting in January.
Yeah.
That's the plan. Councillor Kerr.
Well, I'm glad that's on the table for discussion right now. So I'm assuming that the draft or the material, the recommendations for council appointments to committees and outside bodies will be in the council package available 3 days before.
Before that. It will be available, like the last Friday of the year. It'd be available on the Monday,
Oh, okay.
okay?
And that we might all keep in mind the relative merits of staying on the same committee that we've been on for 2 years or 4 years, or sometimes 8 years. In the case of me and the Heritage Advisory Committee, versus shifting.
Yep.
I mean, for example, Modal changes their council appointments every year with the express purpose of building collective familiarity amongst the council team. And as you can imagine, there's advantages and disadvantages to doing it that way. And there's advantages and disadvantages to doing it with 2-year appointments.
And I think you also have to keep in mind, and this is, behind the cards, is what your plans might be for 2024.
Yes, there's
When we have
that,
the next election.
yeah.
Right? I mean, those are all kinds of factors that we need to think about in trying to determine not so much what we want to do for the next 2 years, but what's council going to be like 2 years after that, right? Okay,
Mr. Mayor, just we forgot to seek clarification on the appointments. I was wondering with the Audit and Finance Committee, is this the only citizen appointment?
We're
Or
missing
in
one.
addition to,
If somebody else comes
Yeah.
along, no, Bill didn't. reply.
okay,
yeah,
Yeah, so if somebody else comes along, we'll be able to add them. Yeah. And I wasn't here for last meeting, but I assume we've approved the council meeting calendar at this point. Does
Yes.
anyone have it? We don't have any committee meetings before the first meeting, the first council meeting in January, right? I don't think we would, but
I don't think so.
if there are any, I assume that they will not take place because we have no council reps.
Right.
Based on the current,
yeah.
but it's only for a week and a half at the beginning of January, so I don't think there would have been any.
And even the members of the committee, the citizens, they're gonna have to have an opportunity to kind of get up to speed as well.
And there were a few deliberations about the proposed calendar, but I think those edits were taken away by the deputy.
Okay, well, I'll just, if there are any, I'll make sure Mo sends a
Yeah,
email to whoever's on that committee from last time saying it wouldn't.
they
be-
were modest, like, clearing off the March break, the school, the March break calendar.
Period, yeah,
There were just a few minor
and
changes.
August and, yeah,
Sounds good.
okay. That's good, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kangata has opted to release the discussion on the newcomers to Mahone Bay. Let's go to the report of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program.
We actually substituted a new number
I
seven.
just want to say a couple of words about our board meeting area. Just for the information of the folks around the table and for the, I suppose, the people at home. We went to the area board meeting last week and Councillor Keely was kind enough to come along to have a principled discussion, I guess you could say, about the merits or not of continuing the area dividend as it has been over the last 4 or 5 years or whatever it is. I think we made our points carefully, economically, and politely. They were well received by the people, and the issue will no doubt come to a vote, if not at the next meeting, the one after that. And I think I don't know that we necessarily need a motion from council for our board members to vote the way they think is appropriate, but I just wanted people to know that our recommendation to the board was to defer the dividend for 2 years until such time as the area balance sheet was more robust than it currently is.
And if I could, the reaction from Antigonish and Berwick was, we're already factoring that piece of money into our budget plans for the next fiscal year and the fiscal year after that. There was little appetite, if any at all, to defer that payment. I think they were sympathetic to the point that you very eloquently made, Councilor Feeney, but at the end of the day, for them, it's such a large piece of money.
Well, it was.
And it's, yeah.
It's soon to be
It's soon to
small,
be smaller,
and then it'll be
but
non
they were not prepared to give it up. Anyway,
So they weren't persuaded.
no, they weren't. They were quite comfortable that, something will happen to bail us out.
I think in the fullness of time, as they always say, the numbers won't lie. The numbers will be, and then the board will have no choices because they'll have no flexibility. But that point was well made, and it's a partnership, and every partner has an equal vote. And even though we don't have as much economic benefit as some of the larger partners, we have the same amount of voting power. So I think at the end of the day, there might be difference of agreements, but no one can say that the town didn't provide kind of a robust backdrop for the perspective Councilor Wilson mentioned. And I do believe that in due course, if there comes a time when the board is asked to vote on declaration of a dividend, then Mahone Bay's representatives will, I would assume will vote against that. And then you can leave with your conscience clean. And I think that it's also an indication of good stewardship and good management and, trying to leave it in better shape when you pass it along than when you inherited it, as they say. So we'll see.
I do think that it would be appropriate, if not now, maybe at the next meeting, but it would be appropriate to have a motion to direct that we decline or defer
Well, I think
that
there,
payment.
I think in the memo that you provided, Mayor, to the area board, there were a number of recommendations, and I'd suggest that if we had a notice of motion, it was really based on those 4 or 5 bullet points, which were recommendations. That's probably a good place to frame up the conversation.
So the motion would be that council resolves that it is the policy or position of the council of Mahone Bay that, and then those points. So that our members would be voting in accordance with that.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody can put that in before the next meeting.
We can do notice of
Wasn't here for the
motion tonight.
area meeting.
We could do that, or I'm not exactly sure how the budget process works there, because the same opportunity will come up in the budgets when we have to approve the budget. Because if the coming budget shows a dividend payment equal to profitability, which is what
Would we not want to tell them before they get their budget prepared,
perhaps.
so they can build it in?
Well, I think we've told them now. The only thing is just, do our members have the support of our council and continue to advocate for that position, which
We'll see.
Councilor Carter.
Well, I'm constantly baffled by the uncertainty about when we need a council vote, or when the board makes decisions.
this is the board's decision. The only question here is, do our members on the board need the direction of our council in terms of how they vote? And it just makes it crystal clear that they're not, a couple of lone actors.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and that, so it would make sense to me that we do vote on that issue about the.
I'm not sure if an Antigonish or Berwick will necessarily do that.
Well, then my next question is, do decisions at the board require unanimous votes?
No.
No. So is it majority? What are the?
Yeah.
2-1 wins?
Well, 4-2 wins.
Who's the board?
Any board member.
There's 6 people.
Oh, 6 people, 6 reps.
Yeah.
But if you 2 reps are directed by council to vote a certain way, then that's 2.
The next area board meeting is after the council meeting, after the 13th.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
So,
We can come back,
Why don't
revisit it.
we'll just have a notice.
We will table a motion to the 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
detail what you're looking
Yeah.
for.
I mean, cutting to the chase, this is an easily solved problem.
Yeah.
All you have to do is act.
And if you,
So,
if council chose not to give any direction, then the 2 representatives to the board would vote the way they saw fit.
Yeah.
But I would prefer, because we are talking about money out of the budget, right?
So
It should be a collective decision, Deputy Mayor.
I have a couple of questions. One, if we're voting to say we are not accepting the dividend, basically, or
No, we're telling our members to tell area not to give us the dividend. If that vote fails, they're still gonna
Yes,
give
so-
us the dividend. Yeah.
just that clarity. And then the other piece, I'm just curious, will area staff have a recommendation for the board around the same issue, and what was their recommendation?
The recommendation is to continue.
So staff. are
Everything is
actually-
fine.
In spite of the discussion.
I don't know. I mean, I think, I'd characterize it as, a bit of a shock to the system. There's another perspective at the table. and they probably hadn't heard it formally in the past, and they're digesting it. And I do think in the fullness of time, two points. One, the CAO and Antigonish certainly acknowledges that the reserve is the reserve issue within area must be resolved. To me, that was like, okay, thank you. That took a few years, but at least everyone's in agreement that the segregated operating reserve there needs to be a plan to fix that problem. And then two, we'll see. I mean, I think that the mayor of Antigonish, it appeared to me, was open-minded about revisiting the topic at the next meeting. I think you're probably right, Mayor, that they'll probably end up saying, we'll deal with this next year. But
If
I
the
think
decision was made to make it effective one fiscal year ahead.
Yeah,
so they
I mean-
can consider- the only drawback is the dividend shrinks every year and the value to area of retaining it shrinks with that. So-
but I mean, take, incremental improvement, so I would take it as a win, and people have more information than they have before. And so decisions will be made with one. I think that the most important aspect of where the area board is the area board understands that they will be held accountable for the decisions that they make. And that there's no expectation that the towns are just simply going to, like, at the end of the day, there's an expectation that there's stewardship at the area board, and the board members, those folks have responsibilities, and there's an expectation that they're going to meet them. And so that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And I think our board members have certainly done that, and are going to be held in high esteem because of the decision, because of that position. Mhm.
Yeah, but the reason I asked that question is staff should have anticipated that there is a conversation that needs to be had based on what the economic situation and financial situation is of the entity that they work in. And so for me, that would have been a very ripe opportunity for them to say that is something we support fully, even.
Right.
So for me, there is the continued concern around. Exactly.
Right.
It was hard, I wasn't at this meeting, but it's hard to say whether Aaron is speaking to what his understanding of the historical intentions were, because he was there, versus what he would do today if asked what the best course for financially for area would be. I'm not sure he's really been looking at it in that way. I think he's just been speaking to the history.
The issues are soaking with the various players, and I think it'll be revisited at the next board meeting late in January, and then we'll see where it goes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver is giving me the tick-tock sign. Okay, let's go right on to Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program Monthly Report. Does anybody have any questions?
And the support letter is just for information.
Support letter
That's for information, yes, yeah.
Okay. Then, in a timely fashion, the Remo minutes from March 21st, 2022. That's the last Remo meeting we had, and the minutes didn't get approved until last week. That's why we're only getting them now, because we didn't meet in between March 21st and that.
Mayor, I noted the date of March, but then in consideration of that date, I wonder about the Joint Services Board minutes. We haven't seen Joint Services Board minutes on this agenda in a long time, have we?
We still have the same issue in terms of they only get provided when they're approved, but there should have been an approval at the last meeting, so there should be something.
Anyway.
I'll ask Mo what's.
Well, the last meeting won't get approved until.
Oh, no, they wouldn't be from the last meeting, but I presume the last meeting will be from September or something,
1999.
Yes, I think over the years have often been
Tired.
shortfalls in terms of having through, so I may need to remind them again.
Okay. Hearing no questions. New business? Nada.
What is notice of motions that were mentioned tonight? Oh,
No.
well, the
Well, there
main
was the
thing was,
one with
did you
the-
want to make one on the, I think it was you who said, on the
Oh,
basis of the
oh, really?
presentation?
On the O'Regan thing,
Did you want to say
Yeah, I can
now?
make a notice of motion. Yeah.
okay?
The other ones were just motions that were contemplated to be on the next agenda from councilors, but they weren't formally done as a notice.
Okay. Are there any questions from the folks at home, Mr. Hyde? Can you check on that?
Yeah, we can check that. I hadn't seen any when I last
Mm-hmm.
looked. Still not seeing any, but as, I guess, as is often done, maybe.
Let's wait for a minute or so and see if anybody,
Somebody playing a question for Suzanne.
Oh, geez, I like my lighting much better in that other spot.
you don't like sitting here and basking in the glow?
Oh, no, I mean, I do it much better. I don't know with you guys, but over here, the lighting's right over top of me. It doesn't, not nearly as good. Still not seeing any questions. We did have 9 viewers. We still have 9 viewers. No question.
Okay. Well, we'll say thank you to the folks at home that have joined us on YouTube. This is our only meeting in the month of December, so before we go, we would say to you folks that did watch us tonight, I wish you all a happy holiday season, and that you'll come back and join us in January. The 13th, I think, is the first meeting in January. And if you do have any questions about anything that was discussed tonight, and you see a counselor on the street or in the superstore or in the bank, buttonhole them and ask them the question, or you can call town hall, or you can call me at home.
Please
The
do not-
numbers are listed on the Facebook.
Please do not throw things.
January 10th.
January 10th, see, we're lucky, Councillor Lois Croft is with us, because we'd all be sitting here on the 13th.
Alone.
Okay,
All right, Kyle.
good night to the people at home.
Just give me a moment to end things here.
Okay. Entertain a motion to go in camera. Moved and seconded under 22.2E and 22.2C.